Who Watches the Rewatchers, a Buffy rewatch podcast.
Do you remember the 90s? It was a weird time. Grunge music was cool, industrial rock, gangster rap. I guess you might say it was a bit moody. Perhaps that's the reason why there was a fascination with vampires. Maybe it was the aesthetic, I don't know. But there were actual vampire clubs. If you look at documentaries from the 90s, you're going to find one or two about some sort of vampire murders or vampire clubs, or you're going to find a daytime talk show where people who identify with a vampire lifestyle. You're even going to find an X-Files episode where people are devoted to the idea of being vampires themselves. Was it a weird Twilight Zone world? No, it was the 90s. And if you remember those days, or if that makes sense to you, then you'll understand our episode today, Lie to Me, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My name is Jared Longbonds. I'm with my good buddy Alan Barnes, and we are Who Watches the Rewatchers, our Buffy the Vampire Slayer rewatch podcast. How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing fantastic, with the exception of trying to get over this darn flu, man.
Man alive. Yeah, it's been a lingering one, I can tell.
You know, I actually feel okay. It's just got this lingering cough. You know, everyone I've talked to have had it. Forgive me for coughing in the middle of that. Has said that the cough persisted for a good solid 2-3 weeks afterwards, and I'm definitely in that phase right now. So,
yeah.
Trying to
How
get
about
there,
you? Do you remember the vampire craze in the 90s, the vampire cults and all that kind of stuff, and the clubs?
I do, and to be honest with you, I think it may be part of the reason that I held off initially watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I first got going, because when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, this vampire thing's overdone, blah blah blah, and didn't want to give it any time. And then I kept hearing great things about Buffy, and so I finally succumbed.
Well, before we dive into Lie to Me, I watched this episode a couple weeks ago before we took a hiatus for our holidays. And my 12-year-old, Marcella, watched it with me. And she says about this fascinating group of fascinated devotees to the vampire world. She's like, what's up with those people? That's so weird. And I said, it was the 90s, hon. Believe me. You know,
Not
I mean,
that
like,
weird compared to other things.
No, I know. I mean, like, it was a weird. I guess it's a weird thing that maybe it was because it was the end of a so-called millennium and a decade and a century that there was maybe a little fascination with something dark. I don't know, but that's that's present in this episode.
You actually just gave me a thought when you were talking about that, and I wonder if it has something to do with. The 90s were kind of the last decade that I think that pop culture was all in sync.
Say more things.
Okay, so by the time we get to the 2000s, the internet has taken over cultural media, specifically music. Like, music was, as far as like people listening to the music on the radio or whatever, it was completely dead by the aughts. In the 90s was the last time that like everyone was sort of listening to the same tunes by the same artists, and it was the last time people were watching the same mainstream television shows at the same time. And you'd watch your episode of Friends or whatever and talk about it around the water cooler the next day or whatever. That hasn't been true now for over 20 years.
Right.
And I wonder if that led to some counterculture of this kind of thing that we're talking about right now being able to manifest. Because these days, whenever I talk to like young kids, they seem to be into what I would call really poppy pop culture, you know. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about like super dark stuff, except for super dark stuff that I would consider to be super pop culture-y, like Five Nights at Freddy's or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, that's what went through my mind.
Your musings are interesting. I don't know either, but you're exactly right. There was more homogeneity, and we've only kind of splintered. I mean, you can watch a really quality show, and you know, and the amount of people who watch with you is quite small compared to the old days, apparently, right? I mean,
Yes.
especially when you only have three
Yes.
networks, right? The buy of the market is much smaller, and you know, for levels of success. But well, this episode is season 2, episode 7. Lie to Me. Let's go ahead and walk through it together. It starts at night in a playground, and my daughter said, "Why is the playground at night always a creepy thing?" And I said, "I don't know, but it is. Whenever you see that merry-go-round or a swing at night, it's creepy. Maybe it's because you're not supposed to be there then, and then the idea of anyone being there is just so out of place. But it's a creepy setting, right?
Yeah.
And
the
there
specific
you see,
thing, and the specific thing that they put the kid on, what is that? What is that thing called? I don't even know. The like spinny thing with all the bars.
well, I think they just call that a merry-go-round, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, anyway, the one that they
Yeah.
picked has got bars moving in a lot of strange directions, and I think that the reason they put him in that specifically was for the visual metaphor of being trapped.
Ah, beautiful. Now, I actually have the script pulled up here. I found
Yeah.
the script. And so it says, exterior playground evening. It says, we see a little merry-go-round turning absently in the foggy dark.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
right, right.
a set of swings is empty. So, yeah, I thought that's a great grab there, a great insight that it's because you know, it was a trapped sort of it's giving you that feeling of him being trapped. Now he's approached by an adult. An adult comes from the shadows, and that adult turns out to be the vampire. And the paramour, to use a fancy word for Spike,
Nice.
one Drusilla.
Yes.
Bat crazy
Who's
Drusilla.
always as creepy as she can possibly be.
Yes, and I always say this is Juliet Landau, the daughter of the famed Martin Landau, and she's very effective in this role. So she comes to speak to the boy, and the boy is looking for his mom. No mom's in sight, and he says the very sad thing that she's always late, right? She says, you know, and Drusilla's like, "Are you lost?" And there's this interesting dialogue between the two. Now I did pull up the script because I wanted to make sure I was right, and I wanted to say something about this. As they're going back and forth, and Drusilla's coming in closer, she reminds me of a very, I don't want to say non-agile cat, only because she's standing upright. So she's not cat-like in that she's walking slowly but standing, but she's cat-like in that that's how they creep on their prey, kind of a slow approach.
Sure.
And she is going to make this boy a snack, a meal, and the boy says to her that I'm not supposed to talk to. James says, I'm not supposed to talk to people, and Drusilla says, "Oh, I'm not a person." So that's just, and she's about to bounce in. And I just wanted to go back to all the boring stuff that I often remind you about, like the soul and how that functions for the vampire and Buffy, and how ultimately it has to do with personhood.
Right.
What the soul enables people to be is people who develop their identity from a life-giving and receiving relationship with others. Whereas the vampire is the diabolical person, which completely receives their self from taking from others, right?
Right.
And so whether the writers or not know they're delving into personalist philosophy or not, they intuitively do. And
Sure.
She says, I'm not a person. And then she's interrupted by who? Who shows up?
She's interrupted by Angel, but she has a line that I want to repeat because I thought that it was spectacular.
Awesome.
She says, "What will your mommy sing when they find your body?"
That's a very, very chilling for this show. Like it was effective. Yeah.
And that's when Angel shows up, and all he says really is to the little boy. He says, I forget what the exact line is, but he says something like, "Run home now."
Yes, run home. It's just run home according to the script.
Okay, very good.
And then Drusilla does. I mean, I'm always in some way throwing shade at Angel. He sounds serious, but it's nowhere near as like powerful a performance as Juliet Landau when she growls. She has a
Yeah.
whimpering sort of growl right after.
Totally agree.
I'm like, wow, she is in that role, man. She's chewing up the scenery with it. And then she says, "My angel."
Yeah, right. My dear boy, my dear boy. That's the other thing that she says that gets repeated throughout this series and the next one a bunch. But yeah, they have this over the shoulder conversation for a good bit where you kind of get some insight into a lot of how Angel perceives her and Spike, and how she perceives Angel now that he is has his soul or whatever. And I think a lot of this is here specifically so we have some insight into what's going to happen with Buffy's friend who's coming in from out of town here in a couple scenes.
Right, Ford. And it's also really a great setup, especially from the point of view of the viewer, because you get to see the point of view from Buffy. As she's on patrol that night, she comes upon Drusilla and sees Angel, and where she's standing, it's all about perspective, isn't it? She sees over a shoulder from higher, an elevated space, I think, and how Drusilla approaches Angel to whisper in his ear, as she want to do, and it's her personality style. It looks like she's kissing him. And
especially because of her gyrations. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and you know what she's saying is, you know, Angel's like, this can't go on, Drusilla. It's got to end. Like, what does he think's going to happen? He's not going to convince her. I mean, it's not you're not dealing with a soul-ensouled person. But she's like, oh no, my pet, and she leans in, looks. It says looks to Buffy like a kiss, but she whispers in Angel's ear, "This is just the beginning," right?
Right.
Then she goes, and then Buffy goes. Of course, Buffy doesn't say anything because she thought she's seen something. And then we cut to the opening sequence, opening credits.
That's right. That's right. Now, one of the weirdest things about this opening, though, before we move on from it, that I want to mention, is that it might be the first opening. It's the first episode they've done where the theme is perfectly clear. It's all about lying. Everybody's lying to one another throughout the show. And in some cases we're trying to find the truth, but people are lying to us. In other cases, very, very, very meaningfully, we have moments where someone doesn't want the truth and they want to be lied to. And so we'll get to those as they happen. But this might be the only one of those that I can remember where none of the thematic material, the lying, isn't happening in the opening sequence. Like, everybody's telling the truth in the opening sequence.
Ah, that's a great observation. I didn't notice that at all.
And it's usually they usually set up all that stuff really clearly in that opening sequence, and they didn't this time. So I thought I
did notice this was both written and directed by Whedon, and I've thought about how you've mentioned before that you think he's a great writer. You've questioned some of his directing ability compared to his writing ability. And as I watched it for the second time last night, I was actually doing a search on my phone, just more about Joss Whedon's alleged abuses. And I watched a few videos of James Marsters talking about how gruff he was. So I was in and out of the second viewing of the episode. But at any rate, here we are. Then we cut back after the credits, the first scene. Giles and Jenny are having just a quite charming conversation as they're going through the hall. Clearly, they're going to go on a date. And I think Jenny doesn't want to tell them where they're going to go. And I think eventually you find out that, not to kill a joke later on,
go ahead.
Payoff,
Please
but you find out that she took him to a monster truck rally.
Yes.
She thought it would be something different, and he's like, dear God. But yeah, so they're going to go out on a joke, and they're walking around, they're talking, and they're making schmoopy faces at each other. And she's like, you're just going to have to trust me. We're going to have fun. And then they get interrupted by Buffy.
Yes.
And Buffy Buffy's distracted. She clearly is carrying this now relationship anxiety that Angel is either unfaithful or has found someone of interest, an older woman.
Yep.
She thinks she looked beautiful and all that happy stuff. And so she's carrying that around like one does, but especially a teenager, with that emotional capacity that they have. And yeah, so she said I did a couple of sweeps, downtown and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And she says no. Giles says no encounters, and Buffy's response is nothing vampire-y, which I like.
Right. Yes, yes, yes. The adding of a Y to many words is very very Buffy-esque. Yeah, and then he says, hey, you should take the night off. And
Yeah.
and she says, he says you could spend some time with Angel, and she says, well, he might have other plans, and it's very
Right.
sad.
I know, and I also found that one part to be a little less than genuine from a
Hmm.
script perspective. Like he's going to suggest you go spend time with,
Yeah,
but whatever. It was just meant
yeah,
to be that place to show you that she's feeling that angst a little bit
sure.
more, right? So we cut to a classroom scene, and
And Cordelia can't figure out why everyone's always picking on Marie Antoinette.
That's right. As I say, there's she's next to Xander, and I love it because you have Buffy and Willow sitting there and in class, and they're doing different things. She's a little distracted as she is usually. That's Buffy, and then you hear Cordelia going on about Marie Antoinette, and then Xander is sitting there, his hand on his fist, looking at her with just the most dumbfounded look on his face, slack jawed, can't believe.
Mm-hmm.
1 second, buddy.
She cared because she cared about the peasants. She was going to let them eat cake.
Yeah, it's like she just completely glosses over, like it's like she's reading fiction, right? Like this. Oh, well, she had a hard day, right? No big deal. It's funny.
I have a side story I've got to tell about this that actually doesn't have to do with the episode, but has to do with Marie Antoinette.
Okay.
So when I lived in Providence, my wife and I had a neighbor. Her name was Natalie, and she was a French woman, and she was a biology professor at Brown. Very, very smart woman. Might possibly be the happiest person I've ever met in my life, which was a little bit freaky sometimes. But anyway, at some point in the middle of hanging out with her, I said, let's eat cake, and she was like, huh? She totally didn't get it, and I had to like explain that this was a Marie Antoinette thing, and she had never heard of it.
Really?
which makes me wonder about French education, French propaganda related to the revolution. What's the scoop? Don't know.
That's funny. Yeah. I like how the teacher responds, and as a teacher yourself, maybe this is how you'd respond to some outlandish comment, and that's one way to look at it.
That's one way to look at it. That's right. That's right.
Meanwhile, what Buffy's just doodling, and she's been on her paper just drawing a picture of pardon me.
Of Drusilla.
Drusilla. And then her and Will are kind of talking a little bit about it. So then they go outside of class, and of course now they get Xander in on the hot goss about Angel and Angel's girl and all that kind of happy stuff. And, we're just kind of going down that rabbit hole. And then they're interrupted by a new character who is a young, attractive male actor who I think the 1990s young pop star, TV star, industrial complex was trying to put upon us. That's what I always say or feel. That's how I felt about this.
Yeah, sure.
This actor, I can't remember his name. I could look it up real quickly.
His name is Jason. I'm not sure I can pronounce the last name correctly, but it's Behr, B-E-H-R, Behr. Is that right?
That's right. And the reason why I say what I said about Jason Behr, and he's been in other things, is at the time they were trying to launch another show, or just shortly after this season, called Roswell, and it was another WB sort of, young adult teeny, good-looking characters and stuff kind of thing. And I feel like this episode has a couple different young, actors that were popping up places that were, I guess it's not just people trying to crank actors out there. They're trying to get work, obviously. But, all of a sudden, our red shirt for this one, yeah.
There is a thing in Hollywood. I read about this in relationship to, did you ever, sorry, I'm getting us off topic again, but I promise I'll make it short. Have you ever seen Stargate Atlantis?
I'm aware of it. I've probably seen one, but not much, no.
Okay, so the main guy from Stargate Atlantis, whose name I'm never going to come up with. I read a thing about him one time, and basically he was saying that he had a deal with an agency where they were basically giving him first right of refusal to like a bunch of different TV shows. So as a result, when he first hopped on the scene, he was in like a gazillion different things, in the process of them like trying to promote him to being like a main actor on some series. And I think that based on what you're saying, I think that Jason Beer had the same contract.
Gotcha. I just looked up Stargate Atlantis. I don't know those actors, so I'm not even going to try to guess who you're talking about. But yeah. That seems like something that might have happened. And well, his last name is Fordham, but she calls him Ford. As a new student, I guess we need to get back to that story and say that they're interrupted from this handsome guy shows up. He clearly knows Buffy. He calls her Summer. She calls him Ford. And what you really discern out of it all is that he got his dad got transferred, and so he's enrolling in he's rolling in town and in school as she's moved. So now there's a new person on the scene from her former high school, and they seem like they've had a great friendship.
And this totally pisses off Xander, because he just found out that that Angel was being naughty, and so he had hope that Angel was going to get out of the way, and now here comes new guy, and I think he says something to the effect of, what's the line? He says something like, doesn't she have any ugly friends or fat friends or something like that?
Xander, this is Ford, my bestest friend of all my friends. Geez, didn't she know any fat guys?
That's what it is, right.
Yeah, I just pulled that part up. Now then we booked, go to the Bronze. They really use the Bronze a lot these early seasons, man. They're hanging out, probably just trying to kill some steam, blow some steam, whatever, and then also kind of introduce Ford around. And I find it a little bit forced. They're forcing intimacy with those two characters. You can't touch me, Summers. I know all of your darkest secrets is something that Ford says to her, and and Xander says, care to make a small wager on that? Because Xander's implying that Ford doesn't really know who Buffy really is, but Xander's on the inside.
Right.
But at some point in all of this, it's revealed that Ford actually knows who Buffy really is, that he knows and has known for some time that she is the Slayer. They don't really get too into many details about how he might know that.
Sure.
But he's known, and that's all you really get, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do know that he was at Buffy's old high school, and we know that Buffy fought vampires there, and we know that her old watcher got killed there, and we know that she burned down the gym.
The gym, right.
So apparently somewhere in the middle of all that, he figured it out. But that's all we really get.
And in this, Angel shows up, and there's an introduction. Oh, this is Ford. He went to Buffy's old high school. They shake hands. And Ford says, after shaking Angel's hand, whoa, cold hands. Xander says,
yeah, right.
You're not wrong.
You're not wrong. That's right.
And, so here we are, more and more exposition. So you're, more sizing each other up in weird ways with Angel, Xander, and Ford. And that's kind of fun.
Yeah, 100%.
He just moved here, Angel asks Xander, and Xander says, yeah, and boy, he moves fast. Angel doesn't really like hearing that. And Buffy and Ford are gone. They have to go somewhere, and really that's the next little bit, right? So they're gonna set up a scene now for Buffy and Ford to be walking alone at night in Sunnydale, to bring the greater reveal of what's going on in the story.
Yeah, she says she tries to make an excuse. She tries to lie to him about what she's doing when she sees this vampire, and she goes off to slay it or whatever. And when she comes back to Ford, she says, sorry about that, blah, blah, blah. And she does her little lie. And he says, oh, I thought you were just slaying a vampire. And that's when he reveals to her.
Right. Yeah, it's all rather nonchalant. And he's like, yeah, I know. And right. And so then they continue along, and they're walking. Do they go by the school again? Is that where the scene happens, where there's two vampires? and Buffy hands Ford a cross and a stake.
Oh,
Or
you're
no.
jumping ahead. We
Oh,
have a couple things
sorry.
in between. That's okay.
Okay.
We have a couple things in between. The big thing in between is we have Buffy on the phone with Willow telling her, what just happened with Ford. And then we have Ford going into his vampire club thing, and we get a little bit of insight about what that is and what's going on. And this is the first time that we meet. You're gonna have to correct my pronunciation of these names. Is her name Chanterelle?
Chanterelle, like the mushroom.
Chanterelle, right? And played by Julia Lee, who's going to be a recurring character both in this series and in Angel.
Okay, so I'm glad that you caught my faux pas there. Yeah, I was skipping way ahead. I don't know why, but because it is important. We do get, so Buffy's telling Willow, and then we get that, like, you don't just get that there's a group of people who love vampires and admire them or want to dress like them. So a lot of that vampire culture in the 90s, as far as I can tell, a lot of it was just aesthetic interest, whether it was the
Right.
kind of goth adjacent or
Sure.
whatnot. And then there were some people who like talked about being psychic vampires, where they had this weird sort of sexual erotic thing where we read and feed off each other's energies.
Mhm.
And then there were some more taboo things where people would actually, take blood and whatnot. And I'm sure
Right.
it went. And then you had the crazy stories that were vampire cults or whatever, or murders, where you were dealing with really mentally unwell people who were just, utilizing images for, I think, to fuel their vile crimes. And
Right.
here we have this group of people. They're playing vampire flicks. They kind of got that neo-goth kind of look about them, walking around. And so you get all that, but you also find out that Ford's kind of the leader of it all. He is
Yep.
top dog. Chanterelle seems lost and lonely. She's a pretty blonde gal who refers to the vampires later as the lonely ones, like a little bit more admiringly.
Right.
And then there's his buddy. His name is Diego. He calls himself Diego, who walks around. He does not look like a guy who would have that romance name, Diego, like a Latin,
Right.
like romance novel character, like lover with a big flowing hair. He's kind of a goober, but he
Yes.
wears a cape, and he's played by Jared Paul, who was in other stuff at this time, and like a lot of like teeny things. Yeah, and so you got the little trio, kind of makes a fun little group, and so. I had a lot of American Werewolf in Paris vibes, and a lot of
Yeah.
Blade vibes, and a lot of Underworld vibes going on in this scene. So yeah,
Totally
All right.
agreed. Totally agreed. And it concludes with saying the lines from a famous vampire movie in
yeah,
sync
it's
with
the
actor.
it's Jack Palance's vampire
Right.
Dracula, and it's not. I was like. I was kind of a little thrown off by the choice. It wasn't Christopher Lee. It wasn't Bela Lugosi. But okay, cool. Jack Palance.
It's the ones they could get the rights to replay on Buffy, right?
It's like, yeah, it was the one-arm push-up guy from the Oscars, from City Slickers.
Right.
The cowboy. All right, so that's the end of Act 1, right?
That's the end of Act 1, and then we get to Angel going to visit Willow to get some inside information. And Willow is very distressed about this because she's not allowed to have boys in her room, which is very, very funny. He promises to be a gentleman. But anyway, he insists that she has to lie to Buffy. She can't tell her about this particular meeting or discussion.
Yeah, and that's noted later on. It's sort of strange. It's cute because she's wearing like an oversized shirt and like fuzzy slippers and all that stuff. But yeah, it's more teen drama from a 200-year-old vampire.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're right. There's more lies.
More lies. And then we cut to the school.
We're back at school. Okay, what's going on
Back
at
school.
school?
Willow is trying as hard as she can to lie to Buffy, and Allison Hannigan, whenever she does those bits or whatever, is always very heartwarming, because she plays Willow in these early seasons so innocent.
I know. It's very believable. Giles has been, he's trying to say in front of Ford, to Buffy, here's how to contact me. I'm going on a date, right? That's the next little bit, and he says, Buffy, Miss Calendar and I are going somewhere tonight.
Yeah.
She's given me her beeper number in case you need me for any. And he looks over at Ford and study help suddenly,
Yeah.
and then Buffy says, and I found this part to be annoying. Buffy goes, he knows Giles, and he's like, what? Ford, he knows that I'm Slayer, and Ford.
Yeah.
The most annoying part is when Ford goes, I know. And like he's in on it. Like it just makes me want to hit him. Like I couldn't stand it. I was like, ugh, it's so annoying, Ford. You're so annoying. Anyway, and Giles pulls him aside. He's like, oh, okay, very good. And he goes, and this is the part that made me smile the most in the scene. He's like, Buffy, you aren't by any chance giving away your secret identity just to impress cute boys, are you?
Yes, that was hilarious. But I thought that scene happened. The cute boys line, I thought that happened in an earlier episode, and so when it happened in this one, I was like, oh, it's this episode. That's so funny.
Yeah,
but
it's
I remembered that.
Okay, so now she says, go off and have fun. So yeah, here we are.
Now we get to the scene where you were talking about earlier, where there are the two vampires.
That's right. So they're walking around the school at night. There's a lot of, for a town plagued with vampires, so there's a lot of hanging out at night, walking around the streets. But they're walking along, and there's two vampires. They're getting into something with the school, the library. I don't know. They're trying to do something. So Buffy's like, gotta go. She hands Ford a cross, and out of his back pocket, very humorously, he pulls out a stake and shows her, and it's kind of cute how he does it. And I have to highlight the clothing that he's wearing. Like, just shows the 1990s oversized menswear. I mean, the shirt I studied it, Alan. I'm just telling you, the shirt was made to fit him. Like, it was not, he didn't buy an extra big shirt. He bought the shirt in his size, and it's just that big. It's just huge, like, remember how everything was so big all the time? We were in the 90s?
I do.
Baggy,
actually,
everything.
I noticed that exact same thing in the previous scene when he's in the room with the vampires, because a lot of the vampires are wearing like Chanterelle's wearing like kind of a slinky outfit or whatever, and his buddy who's wearing the cape or whatever has this like Diego. He's wearing this like huge puffy shirt or whatever, but Ford's wearing like an oversized like orange sweater or whatever in that scene too. Like it's everything he's wearing has got like a lot of mass up top. That's right.
Yeah, he just needs like a hemp necklace with seashells in it to really pull everything off for the for the 90s.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So, but okay, yeah. So he's got his cross, and Buffy goes after one of the vampires, and she's having a really cool fight with them. And what Ford does is chases down the other vampire, uses the cross to make that vampire be held in place, and holds out the stake and says, "If you don't tell me what I'm looking for, I'm going to kill you." And so he's not there to do any dusting. He's there to extract information to make a deal.
I have to admit though that this moment didn't land for me, because how's Ford strong enough to deal with a vampire in the first place? I mean, even a weaker vampire should be 10 times stronger than that dude, according to the lore of this series.
I agree with you. But I think they were probably, the vampire was running and just, happened to fall down in the right way. Okay. Whatever. I don't buy him either, especially when you find out that Ford is physically, sick. I mean, that's what we find out a little bit later on. But that's what happens. By the time Buffy bests her vampire with some cool kung fu, she runs over, and Ford is there with no vampire, because the vampires ran away, and he feigns that he's actually just dusted the vampire, and that it was really cool, and like he coughs a little, like he's just been out of breath from his exertion, and he's like, yeah, it was really cool, and Buffy's there's a little doubt there in her eyes, like, really, that just happened, and yet, but there's no vampire, and there's no reason not to trust her longtime childhood friend Ford, and so they get up and they scurry off, right? Maybe they were just passing through, says Ford. Buffy's like, I don't think so, and then they go on. Now, Angel shows up, right, to speak to Buffy.
No. Angel grabs Xander and Willow and takes them to the vampire cult.
That's the next scene. Yes, thank you very much. They go to the vampire cult. That's probably the best comedic bit here. Do you remember that
Yes.
one? Okay, you go ahead and set it up for us.
The finest comedic bit in it is where, Angel's going off about how these people don't know anything at all about who vampires are and what vampires are like, and he's standing there, and then
How they dress.
Yeah, how they're dressed, and then some dude who's part of the cult like walks up right next to him and looks he's dressed exactly like Angel, stands exactly like Angel, has the whole hair thing, like the whole bit, and it's a very, very funny little beat, very, very, very witty on the part of whoever came up with it.
Yeah, it's old school Hollywood humor, man, for sure. And he's wearing a dark red like button-down shirt, whatever, with a black overcoat and black pants and black hair and everything, and brooding. Yeah, but and that's where Angel acts like he's seen this before, and he actually has an exchange with Chanterelle, and she's like, "You have vampires all wrong." She doesn't know that Angel's a vampire. But she's like, they're just misunderstood, and he's like, you're an idiot. They're not misunderstood.
Right.
And she calls them the lonely ones, and he's rolling his eyes. He actually calls her a fool, and then they storm off, and Chanterelle's like, she's been very sweet. She's like, you don't have to be so confrontational, and she says, other viewpoints are just as valid, right? This kind of very loosey-goosey. Everyone's okay. Everyone can have a point of view. She's clearly lost and pining for something, and Angel clearly doesn't have any time for it.
Right.
So yeah. So that's a great scene because the audience is given all kinds of insider information without Buffy getting it. So it's a good way to do that. So okay. So next we move to the library, right?
Yep. And now we finally find out that what Giles' surprise date was the monster truck thing that you mentioned earlier.
I believe he's wearing a tweed jacket still, so that would be a great thing to wear to a monster truck rally.
Monster truck rally, yeah.
So he shows up, and he's all too happy to have been extracted by Buffy's page, and in the midst of like hearing what Buffy needs to tell him, and she finds out there's a monster truck rally. He also lets it be known that he wasn't really that into it. And so Jenny Calendar's also like, well, you could have told me at any time. We didn't have to stay. And so it's the kind of the cutesy little banter and a little bit of what was that? Spat, a little spatting going on.
Yeah,
so that's fun. Yeah. Okay. So. So then she's like, look, she tells him the kind of the bad news really is there's two vampires, one got away and Ford was involved, and that's not great news for Giles the Watcher to hear, that there's this.
Well, now the one that got away, we find out that she got away in the scene because the vampire is actually there in the library, the one that Ford supposedly killed.
That's right. Gosh, man, I'm forgetting it. She's like, wait, that's the vampire. She let Ford go home, and this vampire runs away with some book, right out of the library. That's the library that Ford said he dusted, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Bad news. Something's wrong. Who is this? Who is this guy, Ford? What's going on with him? Well, actually, also, there's now conversation. This is where they start talking about Drusilla, right?
Right. This is the conversation where Buffy gets inside information about Drusilla, and so she has a little bit of a concept of who that character is. And then we cut to Spike and Drusilla, and we get a little bit of insight about who Drusilla is now.
Yeah, Spike's seems a little jealous, but also paternalistic in some ways. Like, he's like, did you go out the other night? Did you meet anybody? Angel, perhaps, Yeah,
right.
And she's like, oh, yeah, I had a little chat. And then she wants the parakeet to be alive. And he's like, it died because you didn't feed it, just like the last one died because you didn't feed it.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Spike seems to always be perpetually concerned that Drusilla is going to hurt herself, that somehow she has an ailment or sickness, and she's not up to the task of being full-fledged vampire, but she's crazy, and he's crazy about her. And so he's really looking after her all the time, and he doesn't really like her being around Angel, but, it's all that stuff kind of wrapped up in their relationship,
right?
And but it does give you more insight or more of a sense in these scenes that she's physically, or I don't know if she's unwell because she's mentally unwell, or if she's physically unwell and mentally unwell, but that she is not operating at full strength somehow. Right.
Right. Totally agreed. And this is the scene where we finally get the reveal of what Ford wants. Ford shows up at Spike's place.
And he's like, this is cool. He goes, I'd live here. Like he likes it. He likes the aesthetic of whatever Spike has chosen. And you're exactly right. But he's this foolish boy. He's like walking into the lion's den, and he's like, oh, awesome. I'd love to be a lion living in here. But for Spike, he's nothing more than a steak.
That's
As
exactly
he walks in, and so that's, he's like, hey, look, I'll swap for you though. You make me a vampire, and I'll give you the Slayer, and but not without having some comedic Joss Whedon-y sort of writing, where he's like, this is the part where you tell me you're only going to give me 30 seconds to live, and he goes, it's tradition. You have to tell me that. And Spike's like, I'm not so much for tradition. and he is the Billy Idol, like he is the punk, post-punk, like. He's the iconoclast. So he's like, I thought that part was great when he went over. I'm not so much for tradition. He goes and grabs his ear, and he's about to kill him, and then that's when Ford's like, "But I'll give you the Slayer."
Yeah,
and right. I don't believe that either. Like I'm sure Spike's like, well, how are you going to deliver me the Slayer? Like, what insight can you give me to give me the Slayer? Like, But anyway, that's the bait, right? And yeah, that sets it up for the whole last bit, right?
For the whole full final act, that's right. Now we cut to Angel and Buffy talking, and we finally get to the point where they're not lying to one another. Angel's no longer lying to Buffy about his past, and Buffy is overwhelmed by how sad what Angel tells her is. And if you want to talk about any of that mess with Drusilla.
Oh, firstly. He's like, can I come in? And she's like, I thought once you've been invited, you can come in whenever you want. He goes, I was trying to be polite. So he's kind of coming in all gallant and sweet. And so now they have that strange, awkward relationship conversation that sometimes you have where someone runs into their ex-partner, and Angel's trying to, explain himself. But he says this to her, and I'm going to read the script.
Please.
A bit. He says, I did a lot of unconscionable things when I became a vampire. Drusilla was the worst. She was an obsession of mine. She was pure and sweet and chaste. You made her a vampire, Buffy says. First, I made her insane, killed everyone she loved, visited every mental torture on her I could devise. She eventually fled to a convent, and the day she took her holy orders, I turned her into a demon. For a moment, Buffy's silent, right? And Buffy says, well, I asked for the truth.
Right.
And Angel says, Ford's part of some society that reveres vampires, practically worships them. I don't know what he wants from you, but you can't trust him. So that's a poignant moment, because to your point about lying in this episode, she's like, well, I asked you for the truth. It's like, well, when she says, I ask you for the truth, she means I asked for it, but I really didn't want it. Or I didn't really want to get what I was given, right? Which to me is the parallel to when she says at the end, lie to me. So we'll get to that in a minute.
I want to mention that there's a shot here at the end of this scene that I want to talk about for just a moment, because it's a classic visual metaphor for relationships that are in trouble, but it's not terribly well executed. And so I want to bring it up for the sake of mentioning that it's there, and then talking about why it's there, and then talk about and then put it in context as far as poor Whedon, who doesn't always get the cinematography stuff right. So there's a shot at the very end of this before they cut to the next scene. You see Buffy and Angel talking through the exterior window, and you can see curtains in front of them. And so you're seeing them through the curtains, and there is a lamp physically positioned in between them. So it's like a classic Hollywood staple that whenever you want to show that that the characters who are in a relationship are being there's something wrong with the relationship, or they're not connecting or whatever, you put an object in between them in the shot. So you have the two people on either side of the screen, you have an object in between them. In this case, he's using a lamp. He's trying to further push the idea by seeing them through the curtains.
Mm.
And then the other thing that he does is in the window itself, there's some window panes that look like bars. He's trying to keep
Mm.
this bar theme going throughout it, or whatever, as a way to say something about being, trapped by lies. It's a great idea. It's a great visual metaphor. He just isn't physically positioning things in a way where, like, the characters are on the thirds, which is like the way that one would normally organize the shot. And he's not setting it up to where, like, the bars are over top of the characters, which is another way that you would physically organize the shot in order to make that metaphor clear. They did such a great job with it in the earlier scene with the boy in the playground, and here it's sort of clunky, Good try, and I think the idea was solid. They just never got the physical positioning of the camera right.
Okay, I always appreciate your cinematic insights there. That's interesting. I was also thinking, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it. You're talking about characters being trapped and things between characters. This is not a visual storytelling, but going back to what I mentioned about Angel saying, she says, "Can I come in?" And she says, "Can't you come in forever once you've been invited?" And he's like, "Yes, but I want to be polite."
Yeah.
That is, obviously an old trope that you've heard and seen or read about in other places, where vampires cannot come into your home unless they're otherwise invited. I mean, it changes throughout the way we tell the stories. I mean, here in Buffy, once you invite them in, they have an open door policy until you have to put a spell up to shut that door for them. It's a mystical invitation.
Hmm.
But I just wanted to say where that seems to come from is like it seems to come from kind of an old world mentality that your home is protected, and you would bless homes, right?
Sure.
Whether it's really like a sacred blessing in the church or a more folkloric or folk belief system, where I mean, I want you to even take your mind to It's a Wonderful Life, when George Bailey and Mary bless Martini's home with bread, salt, and wine, right? We have these
Yep.
ideas of blessing houses as little places of sanctuary and safety.
Hmm.
Um, you adorn houses with crosses, and even on the doorposts in ancient Hebrew, right? During the Passover event in Exodus, blood of lambs was put on the threshold or on the doorpost so that the spirit of
Sure.
death would go past, right? They would also write scriptures or the Shema on around the doorposts and things. This idea that your home, your dwelling, your domicile was a place of safety and refuge that you had agency over, was a powerful one. And I feel like we're a little bit more transient in our understanding of place in today's culture. Now, we all want places of safety. We all want our own space. We want a nest. But I'm not sure that we think about our places being like that, where we have that kind of agency to give it a blessing and a place of intentionality, or if it's a place from which we hunker down in a world that otherwise acts on us and that we just receive as it comes. It's just interesting to me that can your home be a trap for you, or is it just wide open to the dangers, or is it anyway, that's just waxing a little bit more because of what you said, made me think even further about that idea of being letting vampires in or not.
Oh,
Anyway.
I love that. I love that. I especially love that you brought up "It's a Wonderful Life," because the trapped metaphor. I usually use the scene when I'm trying to describe this in classes. I use the scene from "It's a Wonderful Life" where George is being told by his dad kind of what his future is going to be, as a way to talk about this visual metaphor. Because if you watch that scene, on the background they have butterflies pinned down in photos, or in frames on the wall. And every time you cut to
Yeah.
George, there's this like chandelier in the middle of the table that has these little cords hanging off of it, and every time you cut to George, the shadows of those bands are across his forehead, so that you can see the cage.
Oh man, that's cool. I don't think I've ever noticed that, but I have definitely felt the feelings when I watched that scene.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, well, let's get back to the story
Yeah,
because we
back
cut from
to
there
Buffy.
to the we're outside in the quad during school because
Mhm.
now we're going to have this is when the reveals are pushing against each other because Ford and Buffy are going to see each other at school and she's going to have to continue on with him without letting on in some way that she knows the whole backstory or knows what's going on with him or she's going to confront with it. Like this is the moment they're going to see each other after finding out that he's been lying. I guess I should just say that. He's been lying. Yes.
And Buffy's actually lying to him at the same time because she knows he's lying, but she's
Yeah.
not letting on that she knows he's lying.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's that whole that whole great Gordian knot of lies, right? So she's trying to smile at him. His smile was a little bit weird when he's smiling at her. So there's the awkwardness as they're playing it really well.
Yeah.
I had a great time last night. An interesting time, Ford says. And Buffy's like, I'm glad. And then he's like, can we go out again tonight? And Buffy's like, too busy. And he's really wanting to set the trap for her.
Right.
And this really just reveals that he is, even though they're going to give him the sympathy stuff later for the reason for his bad behavior, this just shows to me that he's just an awful human being. I mean, he did care for Buffy for years, cared for her. Yet he's willing right now in this moment to trade her.
Yeah.
For something he wants. And I don't care how far that goes for you. That's not good. That's my ethics for the day. That's not good. That's wrong. So, yeah, okay. So now we cut to their little awkward exchange, and then they part ways, and we're back at the school in the lounge. Okay, daytime. It says. All right, what's going on there? Is Cordelia's around? She's with Xander and Willow. She's hanging out with them. What's going on? What's Cordelia talking about?
I actually don't remember what Cordelia is talking about in that particular moment. I don't remember her in that scene. To be honest with you, I remember.
Well, she just starts talking. It's all like tell me what's up with that guy Ford. What's his story?
I see.
And Xander's like sitting there having to deal with that a little bit more, right? But Willow says, "Why are you so interested in Ford?" And Cordelia's like, in case you haven't noticed, there's a devastating cute guy shortage right now. And and then she's like, "What's Ford interested in?" And Xander's happy to say, "Vampires."
Right. Exactly.
And Cordelia's deflated, right? Like, not like just like with the Marie Antoinette stuff. She's not properly bothered by what's going on. She's improperly bothered. She's bothered by the fact that he's got another interest than women. Not that he wants to be a vampire and how awful that is, right? It doesn't compute with her values and the things that she's interested in, which is having a cute boyfriend. So yeah.
Okay, so now we finally get to the scene we've been leading towards this entire episode.
Well, I don't know if are you going to go through Willow and Buffy's talk about Angel?
Oh, no, I wasn't going to do that, but yeah, we should do that. So they talk about the fact that Buffy tells Willow that he finally came clean and she knows everything now, and Buffy is clearly very distraught over whatever it is that she learned, and
it's just this moment where you feel, to me, like this could be a lingering issue that comes out in another episode, maybe, because wait, so you and Angel talked, and then you didn't tell me, and I'm sorry, and it was just, there was hurt, we were bothered, yeah. So back to your whole lying.
And Xander says, Angel was in your room?
That's all he cared about. Yeah, he's such a dude.
Yeah. And Willow says, ours is a forbidden love.
Oh yeah. That's very sweet. All right, so go down to the scene where Ford, Diego, Chanterelle, and they're trying, they're getting themselves jazzed up for this hopeful transformation that they're going to go through.
And then Buffy arrives, right? Because this is going to be their date tonight.
Yes, yeah, but she's like, and then she drops the veil of lies. Like, okay, Ford, no, I know what you're doing, I know what you're about, and now we have the final. I don't know what you want to call. I mean, it's this is where we start laying the cards on the table, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I don't want to talk anymore, but really, what you find out. I mean, that's what they say to each other. But really, what you find out is that Ford is a young man. I don't know if his dad's been transferred for real or if he just up and left, but he found out that he has many tumors in his brain and he has no telling how long to live. He says, I may not look like it, but I could be dead like very, very soon. And this is his one chance. And Buffy's
His one chance to live. And Buffy gives him the whole spiel about what's really going to happen. He's not going to continue to live. That isn't how it works.
Yeah, and thinking about this, the metaphor of vampires being any real problems that a teen faces.
Mm-hmm.
And I even heard James Marsters say that in an interview when he's talking about people asking him about how Joss Whedon treated him. He's like, look, Joss is against evil. And he goes, and I'm really down with that. He goes, you know, he really wants to overcome evil. And he goes, and the whole story, you know, vampires are this metaphor. He goes, for anything, any problem, any evil, anything you have to overcome in life. And he's like, you know, and that was his way of justifying Joss Whedon's intensity when dealing with himself as an actor, right? And so he gave us a long explanation, but I thought, well, Alan's right. I mean, that's what Alan's been saying. That's the metaphor of the vampire for Whedon. But so I'm thinking, you know, the metaphor in some way is now being applied to how a teen might try to deal with an incurable diagnosis, right? Like it's not just a problem that you have to overcome like an obstacle once for all, but it might be a problem that it might be part of the events that kill you. This goes pretty deep here, you know.
It does.
The vampire stands in the way of Ford dying well, and actually concluding life well, because he's seeing it as an off ramp to something else. And Buffy's like, you can't live. You're not even going to be a you any longer. You won't be a person. And they don't understand that. They don't get that. And I think that, not to be corny, but I mean, I think that's just how life is. Vampires aside, we might try to escape to have some sort of kind of life when we feel like we don't have life. We might, through either boredom or not having any agency, or feeling like we're born without enough privilege or whatever, we might do things, take things upon ourselves to try to have a kind of life that we think is worth having. And in so doing, we might find ourselves engaged in unvirtuous activities, something wrong, something bad, something ultimately that makes us less than who we are. Yeah. I don't know if that was esoteric, but
no. I think you're right on what that made me start thinking about is the idea that when someone finds out about incurable disease, they go through, you know, the stages of
Kubler-Ross.
The stages of grief.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So and I think now that you've said it, I wonder if that was structurally what Whedon was doing with this, because we have you know, bargaining, and we have what are those stages?
Denial.
We have denial.
Well, I don't have them memorized well. You have bargaining, you have denial, you have anger, you have acceptance, at least, right?
Yeah, I think we've gone through the majority of that with Ford in this episode, with the exception of acceptance. I don't know that I remember seeing acceptance.
No, because it doesn't happen.
Right.
Because before he can move to acceptance, he's chosen this path. And so, you know, Buffy asks in the scene, you know, what's supposed to happen tonight? And Ford said, this is so cool. This is just how I played it in my head. I mean, he has, just like he talked with Spike about, you're supposed to say this, and it can't happen until you say that. He has been working this stuff out in his head as an obsessive, media-saturated boy. Now, he said, this is so cool. This is how it played out in my head. The part where you ask me what's supposed to happen, it's already happening. Now, I'll tell you, that scene smelled, or it had a lot of resonances with Scream, the first Scream to me. If you remember that film, the two villains in it, the two boys, I mean, they were obsessed with horror films and they were enacting them and they were telling
Yep.
people, like, this is what I planned. I'd seen it, this is what I planned. And it was all taken from films.
Mm-hmm.
Life imitates art, but we really were at a point of, it feels like a saturation of imitation in the 90s as well. And maybe we still are. Maybe I'm just not as aware of it, but there was, I just feel like this was a time where quoting movies as like a group's culture was a height. I think we've talked about that in other episodes. Like, did you ever have these quotes? Or parody films, parody music, spoofs. I mean, there's a lot of just imitation happening.
Well, okay, so I've been thinking about that since we had that conversation. I asked my daughter about it because, I don't know that I wouldn't have thought that anybody was doing as much quoting these days. But my daughter immediately started talking about all the things that her and her friends quote, which are the YouTubers.
Skibbity toilet.
Yeah, they're quoting all that stuff as opposed to the films that are more, in my opinion, movies and these sort of mass TV shows that were watched by so many more millions of people at the same time, were from my thinking, the references were easier to follow because more people knew them. Now we have so many more in groups for different things. I think it's harder to follow. But to your point, this is the thing that I was trying to get down to. I think we still have all of that level of imitation, and I think we have all that level of parody. I just don't think that people are always completely aware that that's what they're doing anymore. Like at this point in time, when Weird Al Yankovic is doing, Eat It or whatever, he's very, very clearly parodying something that everybody knows. Whereas today, when what's the redheaded pop singer's name? I can't think of it right now.
Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran. When Ed Sheeran is singing a tune, he's literally doing a spoof on something that everybody already knows, but he doesn't think of it that way, and neither do the people who are listening to him.
Well, don't let Ed Sheeran fans hear that. All right, so what's happening here in this moment? Like, the angel notes the door, and the door shuts, right? And it can't be open, and Buffy looks at Ford, and Ford's like, that's part of the plan. Once the door's shut, it's locked. Those people come in, those vampires will get in, we get turned. Buffy knows in this moment that the deal is only for Ford, and the rest of the people are just sheep. And
right.
Ford's okay with that. And specifically when they're talking about that, the camera is focusing on Chanterelle, who's clearly lost, clearly lonely, clearly in need of a community, of love, of acceptance of some type. And this is where she thinks she's going to get it, how misled she is, which is, there's a lot of, even though this is overtly about a vampire cult, the show is not about cults, but there's an undertone about how cults work that's kind of playing throughout, and how they're based on lies as well, but also how we can easily be lied to when we are in desperate situations.
Right.
How we can lie to ourselves, how delusional. That's all happening. It's happening with Ford and Chanterelle in different ways. And then Diego is just delusional in the fact that he is not cool. I mean, he thinks he's cool. He's absolutely not cool.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Now Buffy's looking for an exit. There's got to be another way out of here. This is a bomb shelter, says Ford, and they're going back and forth, and there's more of the arguing and the Chanterelle, why are you fighting it? This is what we want. And Diego's like saying things. They're going back and forth, but it's about to be the moment when Spike and the others come in, and Spike comes in and says, I think he says, who's hungry, right? This is a buffet, right here.
Right.
And then they start to, they start to go kill people. I mean, they feed. They're feeding right there, and Buffy begins to go into defense fight mode. And she knocks out Ford for a second. And then there's her chance. She sees her chance with Drusilla coming in frame.
Oh, while this is happening, very quickly, is happening, Angel, Willow, and Xander are leading as many people out of the bomb shelter as they can.
That's right. Yeah. So that's all happening as well. So when Drusilla enters the frame, she kind of looks, she looks anemic and weak and small and all that, and she's not pouncing on people. And Buffy sees her. That's the chess move. So she runs and jumps up there after kicking other people's tails, and she takes her like a hostage from behind with a stake to her. And she calls it Spike and says, look, you do any more of this, and she's going to get it. And out of love and devotion, if a vampire could love, so whatever that is that he has for her, Spike calls off the hounds.
Right.
And then they all leave, right? And I forget how they get out of there and get in there with the bomb shelter bit being closed, but...
So the bomb shelter isn't actually closed until Buffy runs out the door, because the bomb shelter was open for the Spike and all those people to come in. While Spike and all those people are coming in, Buffy's trying to fight them off, but Angel and Xander and Willow are using that open door to try to lead as many people out. Well, after the Drusilla scene that you're talking about, Buffy walks out the door, closes the door. When the door closes, it's time locked.
That's right. This is where she makes a speech too, and just to read it, because we've already talked about it. She says,
"Please,
I got a newsflash, brain trust." She's talking to the cult kids. "That's not how it works. You die, and a demon sets up shop in your old house. It walks and talks and remembers your life, but it's not you." And they don't listen. But that is a recurrent. It recurs as an explanation for what happens when your soul's gone. Demon sets up shop. So you got that right. I got that wrong, I was just forgetful. She's able to get away from Spike, toss Drusilla back in. The door is locked, time blocked, whatever. And now there are some people left in there, but the vampires are left in there, and most notably Ford is left in there.
That's right.
And when she comes out in the alley and Angel and the other Scoobies show up, she says, they say, well, what do we do? She says, they will figure a way to get out. We should come back later for the body. Which was really sobering when she said that. The look on her face, the line, the way it was written, the way it was delivered, we'll come back for the body. And they're kind of like, what body? And she she means one body in particular, right?
Yep.
And isn't it a cut from there to her coming back?
Actually, they cut to back inside the bomb shelter, and you get the conversation between Ford and Spike.
So where's my reward, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right.
He still thinks he's gonna get it.
But yeah, but right after that is when Buffy comes back into the bomb shelter after the door's been open, and she does find the body.
She does find the body, and then it cuts. Now so it cuts to her later at the cemetery with Giles, and there's a tombstone, which I thought, as a person who's involved in doing funerals a lot, that's the fastest a tombstone has ever been put up. But there it is. It's Ford's tombstone, and let's not talk about the dialogue yet. Let's just talk about the very end. Ford rises from the grave as a vampire, and she dusts him before he even has a chance to even say a word. Yep. So my question to you is, does that mean that Spike gave him his reward? Or does it mean Spike just killed him and said, whatever, I don't care?
No, I think it means that Spike did give him his reward, knowing that he wasn't going to survive. Because if he wanted Ford to survive, he would have taken Ford with him.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah,
that's a better way to think. Because I was thinking he didn't get his reward, but he sure enough turned into a vampire.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, when she's waiting and she's talking to Giles, it's a very poignant moment. And Buffy says, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Giles says, you don't need to say anything. Buffy says, it'd be simpler if I could just hate him. I think he'd wanted me to. I think he made it made it easier for him. Be the bad guy, be the villain of the piece, but really, he was scared. Giles says, I suppose he was. And she's trying to understand it, and Giles is like, yeah, this is all called growing up, right? And she says like what we've said before, I'd like it to stop then. I don't want to grow up. But Giles is like, I understand. And then Buffy says, well, does it ever get easy? That's when she kills Ford. Ford jumps from that moment.
Right.
To interrupt. That's very Whedon-y too. Interrupt the deeper, more emotional moment with something else for a moment. Interruption. She kills Ford, and Giles says, "You mean life? Like, is that whatever gets easier?" And she goes, "Yeah. Does it get easy?" Giles says, "What do you want me to say?" And I've had that moment before where I've said that to somebody. I'm sure
Sure.
you have. What do you want me to say?
Sure.
Because clearly you don't really want to hear what I have to say.
Right.
And Buffy says, and I'll just have you say it. Go ahead,
Well,
Alan. What did she say?
lie to me. She says, lie to me.
Yes, it's terribly simple.
Mm-hmm.
The good guys are always stalwart and true. The bad guys are easily distinguished by their pointy horns or black hats, and we always defeat them and save the day. Nobody ever dies, and everybody lives happy ever after.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. I found this personally to be a very good episode. What about you?
Oh yeah, it's one of the greatest. I don't know. You've got the ratings there. I would be shocked if it wasn't in the top 20.
Well, for Vox
Mm-hmm.
says top 28. Paste magazine gave it number 52, and
Okay.
Rolling Stone gave it number 14. So,
Okay.
you got an upper third for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's real good. Probably for the reasons that you highlighted at the first about how thorough this whole lying theme was weaved throughout.
Right. Right.
Also, I think that the vampire cult stuff is odd as that sounded to my 12-year-old daughter. I mean, it is odd, but
Yeah.
maybe she wouldn't even find it believable. But I think that the fact is that you had these misled people who were buying delusions because their lives were empty or missing something is
Sure.
just a universal human reality that we may or may not face, but we see in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's got a lot of existential heft to it when we watch that bit.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Wow.
No, good episode, and I generally find that the ones that Whedon writes and directs are the best ones. But that's not always true. There are a couple other guys that do fantastic work. I always like Drew Goddard's episodes.
Yeah, he's good. Cabin in the Woods, baby. Cabin in the Woods. Love that movie.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's classic.
I always say about Scrubs and everything that Bill what's his last name? Oh, forget the name of the Bill Lawrence does. Spin City, Scrubs, Ted Lasso,
Yeah.
Shrinking. It's silly, but it's got a lot of heart.
Yeah.
When Buffy's at its best, it's dark, but it's got a lot of heart.
Yeah.
And I find this one is dark. It's got a lot of heart, and it's very good. So, well, I don't have any greater, deeper, more further analysis than what I've said. How about you, my friend?
No. I have hit on all of the ideas that I felt I needed to talk about in relationship to this particular episode. But I will say that we've got a pretty good handful of classics coming up here. We've got next we have The Dark Age, which is when we find out a little bit more about Ginny Calendar. And then we have the What's My Line parts 1 and 2, where we meet another Slayer. And then we have a couple of just Monster of the Week episodes. But then we have the mid-season turn where everything changes for the season. So we're coming up on a bunch of good stuff.
Well, I look forward to it. My resolution on this show, as I watch it going forward, is to take your lead and look at where the characters are and what might stand between them. And I'm going to look to see if I see any visual cues that you mentioned. That was interesting.
Yeah, man. Awesome.
All right,
Cool.
my friend. Well, hey, next time. See you then.
Later.